Grace is a topic that I don't hear as much discussion of these days. And when I do, it's usually about one particular song. You know the one. Do I even have to say the name of it? So today we're going to talk about opening the treasury of divine grace and kind of what grace is and why we need it. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie. I am a non-binary sci-fi fantasy writer, and I am joined today by my husband, Brian.
Hello. Okay, I need to know which song.
Amazing Grace.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So all those that guessed Amazing Grace, you win. Actually, Stormzy's was the first thing that jumped in my
Oh, Blinded by Your Grace.
Blinded by Your Grace from Stormzy. Great song.
Great song.
No, Amazing Grace was Grandpa's favorite song.
I've never really been a fan of it. It's the first song I learned how to play on the organ because my great-grandmother loved that song. When she found out that I was interested in learning how to play the organ, she opened up the sheet music for it and taught me to play it. It doesn't work anymore because it was an old air-powered organ that had an electric compressor on it. And unfortunately, the bag that held the air to go through the pipes is given it needs maintenance, but I still actually have that organ in the house right now.
It's in the office.
It is not playable, unfortunately. Grace is an extremely misunderstood and misappropriated term in most discussions, especially Christian discussions. And I'm starting to feel like people are maybe wondering where we're going to get more into the paganism. Trust me, starting next month, we're going to have a banger because I really want to have a discussion of should we be saying paganism or paganry. Yeah. I just had a lot to say this month because of the holidays and the things associated with it. But grace is important on either side of things. Grace is very misappropriated because of Augustine. And, we're going to be talking about that a little bit later this month. Augustine and what I consider the great error of original sin. Grace, according to this way of thinking, is your ability to go, hey, you're the most horrible thing ever, but I'm willing to look past that. And you? I don't know how else to describe it. No?
I would think that would actually fall under the definition of tolerance. Be bad and use a definition in a word. Tolerance is tolerating a thing. No, bad definitions.
It's not even really tolerance because it has to start with this, you are the worst thing ever, and I hate you for that. Yeah. But I'm not going to destroy you, even though you deserve it. Original sin is a worldview that my brain really cannot get behind in any way that is meaningful, powerful, or helpful in any way, shape, or form.
Very judgmental, very wrathful.
Mm-hmm. So if we're not talking about grace from the perspective of original sin, where we're all horrible, horrible, bad people who need to just have God pretend that that's not the case for a minute so that we're not immediately smitten by lightning. What is grace? Where do you find it? Grace, to me, is the answer to why is the universe not fair? The first instance of grace that I ever remember having explained to me was, again, from my great-grandmother. I used to go over to her house a lot. We lived in a trailer behind her house for a portion of my childhood, and I would go up and she'd pull out the Bible and I would play Amazing Grace on the organ because she insisted that I play Amazing Grace on the organ because she taught me how to play it and it was her favorite song. And then she would pick up the Bible and we would read something and then talk about it. And that was a lot of my childhood for a period there. One day, as you do as a child, I said something about, man, that's just not fair. Granny was very granny about it and was like, be very, very happy that the world isn't fair. You don't want what you deserve. No one wants what they deserve. And when I heard that as a kid, my initial thought was, oh, yeah, I don't want, because I'm a bad person, blah, 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 blah. But she went on to explain, if the universe was fair, the moment you did a bad thing, something terrible would happen to you, whether you knew it was a bad thing or not. There's no learning in that world. There's no justice in that world, just immediate retribution. There is no salvation in that world. You need grace. Grace is that easement, that allowance that lets you have that space to grow, to develop, and to change. That was interesting coming from her because, she was very set in her ways. She was in her 90s. It was hard for me to understand coming from her because then, you look how she treated other people and it didn't make sense to me. It did later. But I don't think that that's all that grace is. See, we often, because of this framework of original sin, view grace in terms of punishment. And that's not what grace is. When you go out and you look at waterfall, you experience divine grace. You experience natural grace. You experience the grace of this gift, this unmerited gift that is just presented to you. You look outside and you see a rainbow and you receive this grace. See, to me, grace and graciousness are tied together, not just linguistically. Because, I could make a very pedantic argument of, these words, but that's not helpful in this case. Because while, yes, the words may be related, the ideas often are not. But they should be. Grace is simply, as I learned as a child, unmerited favor. I love that phrase. Unmerited favor. I didn't have to wake up to beautiful weather. I didn't have to go to sleep last night in that beautiful, cool air that was coming in from the freshly cleansed air from the rain that had happened earlier in the day. I didn't deserve any of that. I don't even know what I could do to deserve any of that.
Well, you would have to get out there and move the little, molecules around to create the ideal atmospheric conditions. That would be the effort that would be required. In that example, it's why it's a gift. Because I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I didn't I didn't start earlier in the day yesterday to push the wind, move the molecules so that night would be nice and cool and not to have the thunderstorms.
That is, to me, the blessing of grace. We find grace in a lot of places that we don't often look for it. We're not open to it. We don't see it. Again, this is partially from those blinders that original sin put on a lot of people that grew up in a Western country. And unfortunately, in countries that have been infected by that mind virus. But grace is something that flows throughout nature, throughout our lives. As a storyteller, when that inspiration hits for a new character, a new story, a new something, that's grace. I didn't earn that idea. I may have put the work in to learn my craft, to do whatever research I needed to do on the project. But trust me, I've been a writer for long enough. When the words just flow, I didn't earn that. That's grace. That just happens, and it's wonderful, and it's beautiful, and I love it. Grace to me is something that we draw from Awen, from that divine inspiration, that great breath of creation that flows through everything. It's like taking a bucket out of that great current of Awen. And just to use the traditional Druidic words, there's a difference between Awen and Nuefre. Nuefre is the energy of life. It's life force. I often tell people when introducing them to the idea, if you've watched Star Wars, you understand the basic concept of Nuefre. Nuefre is the force. It surrounds us, it penetrates, it binds the universe together. Nuefre. Awen is a little bit more detached from that. It's a little bit broader than that. Awen is that creativity that is flowing through everything, that inspiration, that divine breath. The word literally means heaven or sky. It's everywhere at all times, but every now and then the Awen hits you and you Awena. You act in Awen, as Awen, through Awen, with Awen. You become Awenid. You are imbued with it, filled with it, to the point where you and it are indistinguishable from one another. And that is a special kind of grace when that hits you, when that comes in. And I think the one thing that we need to learn more than anything else is how to open that treasury. How do we get access to that grace? Not just to the Awen, but to that Nuefre. How do we get access to that energy, that grace in our lives? One, as we've said on previous episodes, I think prayer and devotion is a place where we can open those gates.
Goes all the way back to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It starts with that practice of gratitude so that you can gain an appreciation of grace. A lot of it is giving grace where and when you can. Just in that act, you get to experience the one side of it and participate in the joy that that can bring. But it also sets up that stirs the flow. To be very physics in a way, you've got a bunch of potential energy you need to turn into kinetic energy. A force needs to act upon it. So you can control your actions. You can be that force to start that flow. And the easiest way to start that flow is to participate in grace and give unmerited gifts where and when you can.
This goes back to our episode on the law of the returning tide. If you are giving grace out into the world, then there is a higher potential that grace will come back in the returning tide. That if you're sending it out, there is a greater chance that it will come back to you. Biggest thing here is practice mindfulness.
Yes.
A moment of mindfulness meditation is so helpful, and longer mindfulness meditations if you have time for it. But punctuating your day, because I think we are surrounded by so much grace and we don't see it, we ignore it. And so that we feel that we're living without it. That wonderful, refreshing water, that wonderful, warming hug that you got from your coffee this morning, or at least I got from my coffee this morning, right? That's grace. That is a form of grace. Starting there, learning to see it there, helps you to see it and find ways to attract and tap into it in other places. But you always have to start in the little things.
That's why I mentioned the practice of gratitude. It's that mindfulness of being thankful and remembering to say thank you. And every time, even the smallest bit of grace, as Charlie pointed out, when you have your coffee in the morning, it gives you that little energetic boost that you needed to get your day going. Just being thankful for that little caffeinated jolt and got you moving. And just recognizing the little things when somebody, holds the door for you or lets you go first. Being thankful, thank you to them is always nice, but also recognize it was an unmerited gift. It was grace that they gave to you. You didn't do anything to deserve to be in front of them because it's not actually how things work.
I think one of the places that we encounter this word is in the Thanksgiving we say before meals, right?
Mhm.
You got to say grace. And I don't think many of us do say grace. I'm not saying that as you should say a prayer every time you eat or before you eat or after you eat, depending on the tradition that you're coming from or whatever. But I don't think we actually say grace. I know in my family, I was taught to not just be thankful to God for the food that was on the plate, but to be thankful for the farmer that grew the food, for the people who carried the food around to get it to the store where we were able to get it, the person who prepared and cooked the food. If we are eating plants, to be thankful for the plant that provided the food. If we're eating an animal, to be thankful to the animal whose life was given up for this food. To say grace, to have that attitude of just thank you, because it really feels weird to try to explain this if you've not experienced it yourself. Grace is unfortunately one of those things that you know it when you see it, but it's really hard to put into words. Grace is everything from finding that extra dollar in your pocket when you didn't know that you had it there and you needed it at the moment, or finding that dollar on the street or whatever, right? That is a little bit of grace, but also just a friend comes over and just brings cookies. She knows what kind of cookies you like and just knows that you like them and had some time and was thinking about you. And so she made them and brought them over. That is grace. But also having somebody to take care of you when you're sick and be mindful of the pain that you're experiencing. That's a form of grace. That's a grace we can extend to others. And it's a grace we often get from others, but is really hard to see in the midst of suffering. suffering really does blind us to
Mhm.
grace.
All those acts of separation blinds the individual from grace. Thinking back to my own youth, we said grace at every meal was required, but it was just required. There was a detachment from the meaning behind it, from the significance of what the actual act was. So it just became this thing we did. Later on, when I was on my own, it was my choice whether I did a thing or not. I dropped it because it was just this vestigial thing. I didn't see the significance because I was separated from that. And later on, when realizing what it actually is, being thankful for the gift that was the merited gift that not Cal gave its life and didn't, or it wasn't my life that I could claim, but I still enjoyed the burger. I still enjoyed the steak. Having that connection really helps.
I'm a really big fan of visualizations. I think our imagination is such an important tool in spirituality to be able to help us to understand things. So if you're capable of visualizations, because some people, it's a real struggle. And so we'll talk about that more in a second. But if you are capable of visualization and you're having a hard time connecting to this idea of grace, find something you really, really love. A kind of fruit, a candy bar, beverage, preferably not an alcoholic one, just because we don't want to dull our senses. We're actually trying to heighten our senses here, though I won't tell if you don't. As you're sitting there with it, start peeling apart the layers of what grace are you receiving from this? Because let's take an orange. Orange is a very good and often used example of this for both mindfulness and for grace. The moment you get in proximity to a good orange, you smell it. You see it. It's beautiful. It's like a little sun sitting right in front of you or held in your hand. Beautiful to look at. It's this jewel, but you smell it. You instantly have that aroma, that luscious citrus smell that just greets you. That's grace. And so imagine, like you would in a cartoon, see that aroma. Just imagine it wafting around like luminous smoke in the air and going into your nostrils and into your soul. Just that wonderful grace, just wafting. And we haven't done anything to the orange yet. This is just from the orange existing. Maybe it's your favorite beverage and the smell coming off of it. Because I can't think of a food that I like that doesn't start with greeting me with a wonderful scent and a very enticing sight. And then you open it, and that smell probably got stronger. Now you can see the component parts, that thing that you're really there for. It becomes more inviting, more open. As you put it in your mouth, just let it rest there for a minute. And imagine if it's something like a chocolate that's melting in your mouth, imagine like this luminous grace melting off of it as it's coming into your mouth. If it's something juicy like an orange, imagine that juiciness as this kind of luminous liquid just flowing into you, this grace just flowing into you. And just sit with these images as you're taking it in, watching it become part of you, watching it give of itself. And you'll start understanding and connecting to that grace. Once you start understanding that in your food and in your beverages, always a great place to start with a lot of spiritual practices because it is so intimate. That food and beverage is becoming a part of you. And in most of our spiritual work, that is the end result we are striving for. How does it feel? You're drinking something hot or something cold, or you're eating something hot or something cold. How does it feel as it goes in, as you're swallowing it? Do you feel it moving in? There's nothing better than on a hot day having an ice cold lemonade, feeling that coolness just go down inside and fill you up. It's such a wonderful experience. And it is an experience of simple, natural grace. And once you learn how to see it in those things, start looking for it elsewhere. When a loved one touches your hand or gives you a hug, can you not feel the grace emanating from them in that moment? When you go outside and the sun caresses your face on a cold day, or a gentle breeze blows the heat away on a hot day, or a gentle mist or rain cools you off on a hot day, do you not feel the grace in that moment? Do you not recognize the grace in that moment? You get to the place and you park your car and you look and somebody left time on the meter. A little bit of grace in your day. Once you start looking for it, you'll start seeing it all over the place. And I think this is why Brian was talking about gratitude. Grace is often what we're thankful for. We just don't recognize it as what it is. And we feel like we're living in this cold, hard world that's so vicious and mean and cruel. It's tiny, but somebody gives you a like on social media. That's a little bit of grace.
And somebody shares a smile.
Someone shares a smile. Your favorite song comes on. That is an intimate sharing of grace. The grace that that song was created and shared with the world. Looking at a painting, that grace comes in. You see, harvesting grace, opening the treasury of divine grace, is less about it being walled off from us and more about us neglecting to see it. And no, before you get confused, I'm not saying everything is always wonderful or everything is always good. I'm not one of those people. If you don't see that everything is great, you're cursing yourself.
There's lots of suffering,
Yes. A lot of pain. There's
a lot of pain, but in a way, that pain and suffering is, when you get into the deeper meditations of it, is in a way a grace, because when that pain isn't there, you're able to appreciate. I had injured my thighs really badly about 6 months ago, still struggling with healing from that. But yes, it's pain and suffering, it's bad, but the grace was recognizing and seeing all those wonderful opportunities when the thigh muscles work correctly, when they don't hurt, when they aren't trying to tear, bring suffering. That's a grace. It's just, we don't often notice.
Many, many years ago, I took up a brachat practice. I try to say 100 blessings a day. The number 100 is figurative. Unless it really matters to you, don't count. Like, you don't have to count. The point is to constantly be saying blessings. Always find the blessing, find the grace. A lot of my friends mock me for this because when my legs are really hurting, I will often say a very simple blessing. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, for giving me the grace to remember that I am alive. Or sometimes I will just thank the pain for reminding me that I am still alive.
Or even just being thankful that other parts are working wonderfully.
I try to look into the darkness and find the light that's in it. Like, to me, as somebody with chronic pain, this is one of the ways that I tend to cope with chronic pain. I agree with Kierkegaard and several others who said that depression is the proof of the immortal soul because it can devour and devour and devour it. There's always more there to be devoured.
Yeah. Back to the leg injury, I was ungrateful at first because it's easy to give in to the pain and the suffering, being upset, stressed. My shoulder and back started failing. I quickly became grateful for working hands, for working feet, for working brain. I suddenly realized I better start appreciating everything because all stuff starting to fall apart.
I feel like I have to say, this isn't that whole just be happy with what you got kind of boomer thought process. That's not what I'm talking about at all.
No, it's
I'm more grateful for the parts of me that are working.
It's recognizing those unmerited gifts.
Also, just recontexting our lives. Grace, in so many ways, is finding that light even in the darkest places. And if you can find that light, when I learned my brachat practice, the example that was given is if somebody comes to you and tells you your best friend has died, then say to them, blessed are you, O Lord our God, who granted me the gift of hearing. That's hard.
It is.
That's hard. It's that reminder that we need sometimes that not everything is awful. No, everything's not awesome 100% of the time, all the time. But neither is everything 100% awful. There's usually at least something, some bright point, some good thing, either in your life or in someone else's life. Because I think we get often very solipsistically obsessed with our own experiences or very hyper-focusedly trapped in the experiences of others. Yes, I look at the world and I see this great suffering that's happening around the world. And I feel selfish thinking or doing anything but trying to help alleviate that pain and suffering. But I'm a human being that lives in the central United States, and it's all the way over there. And I am not in a position of power in my culture or my government. So there really is like a little bit I can do. I can state my opinions. I can write letters. I can reach out to my congressman who doesn't care, my senators who don't care. All, in fact, are very pro-suffering in the world. I can at least take what little action I can. But I can't spend all day, every day, blinded by that pain and suffering, because that wears us down. You see, the point and purpose of learning to see grace is what fills up that tank. This is what the modern gratitude movement gets wrong. Gratitude does not fill up the tank. Gratitude helps point you towards grace, and grace is what fills up that tank. If you do not have, or you are not seeing those parts of your life that are giving you grace, you are going to burn out and have a really hard time building yourself back up. And that's why we need to open our eyes, which is how we open the treasury of divine grace.
Which is also why we're remembering, being mindful of it now during this festival of Lúnasa.
Yep.
This time of harvesting, as it is. It's another thing that is harvested.
It's a gleaning. It's something that's just everywhere. We just need to go and pick it up.
And fill our buckets and be recharged and rejuvenated.
I hope this meant something to you. I hope if you heard the clicky clackies of our little doggy, who has been very much running around us.
That's what the clicking is also, in case you're wondering.
If you think of somebody that you would benefit from this message, please share it with them. Share this on your social media. Share it with your doggy who likes to run around while you're talking. Put something good out into the world. It's what we're doing with this. If you think that this will help somebody, share it with them. Give it a like, a comment, wherever you're listening. That helps us out a lot too. If you're listening to us in a place that allows you to leave reviews, those are like Apple Podcasts, those reviews help out immensely. If you're listening to us on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever, and you haven't already clicked that subscribe button, that helps out a lot too. Plus, helps you keep from missing new episodes when they come out. And we're doing this 5 times a week right now. There's a lot of stuff that you could get from this. And of course, you can go over to check out everything that we're doing over there. Subscribe to our newsletter. You'll get these episodes in your inbox or on your app every day. If you have a few dollars, you can pass them our way and help us to keep doing the things that we are doing. Also, I've got a lot of stuff. I've been writing a lot of stuff about Bridget lately that may or may not, by the time you hear this, be up over at Wisdom's Cry, but I do a lot of it. That's where my personal journal is. I build it in Obsidian, which I absolutely love, and periodically click publish. I have a threshold on this project of when I want to hit publish, and I don't know if by the time this episode comes out, if I will hit the publish button or not, but suffice it to say, a whole bunch of essays on Bridget are about to show up over there. So keep your eyes out for that. We might actually do a special episode about it when it does go up. Thank you so much for everything that you have been doing for us. It really does mean a lot. Seeing those likes, seeing those shares, those comments that have been coming in. But it may not be a lot, but every little bit helps. That's you giving us grace. And we are extremely grateful for it. So until next time, may blessings and light fill your life. Amen.
Amen.